All right. Well, welcome to Beyond the Cart, retail media strategies for brands that are rewriting the rules. I'm Matt Larson. I'm the Vice President of Media and Connection Strategy at Collective Measures.
I'm Mike Baranowski. I lead our analytics and engineering team at Collective Measures.
All right. So everybody in this room likely knows that retail media has been around for a long time, but the last several years, it's really experienced a massive boom. And while retail media networks, or RMNs, as you're going to hear us refer to them quite a bit today, they're definitely proficient at driving online sales. It's no longer just about e-commerce. Retail data is now being more widely used, reaching consumers across all channels and across the entire path to purchase. It's also proven to be a really effective tool, with 8 out of 10 advertisers stating that retail media has a stronger sales impact than other media channels. And with a growing number of channels and networks and brands in the space, we've seen spend nearly triple since 2020, with $55 billion expected to be spent this year alone. And the number of retail media networks has also grown significantly. Some reports say that a new retail media network is created once every 1 to 2 months, which is absolutely crazy. And it's not just big chains either. We have people like the Winn-Dixie and even the Piggly Wiggly that you can now buy retail media across. The major players are, however, still capturing the lion's share of the spend. We see Amazon leading the pack with 77% of retail media dollars this year. However, their share is beginning to erode as others start to catch up. So large retailers like Walmart and Target are quickly ramping up their ad tech to capture all the dollars that are flowing into this space. We also have specialty players like Dick's Sporting Goods, the Orange Apron Network with Home Depot, and longtime RMN Best Buy, all filling different advertiser categories and capturing different market segments. And it's not expected to slow down at all either. In fact, by 2028, eMarketer predicts that 1 out of every $4 will be spent with a retail media network or with retail media data, which is an absolutely insane stat when you think about 1 out of 4, or 25% of all spend flowing through these types of channels. And most of us, when we think about retail media, we're thinking about driving sales on a retailer website. These tactics are most akin to search marketing, but rather than working with the Googles and the Bings of the world, we're going directly to the retailers, working on directly with Amazon or Walmart or Target to buy sponsored ads there. This is becoming more and more important because a lot of consumers don't even go to the search engines anymore to look for products. You heard Audrey talk about the role of search engines a little bit today. Most people are just jumping straight to the retailer websites. Less than half of people actually begin their product search on search engines today. But as the RMNs have matured, we're seeing strategies go well beyond the retailer sites. The retailers are leveraging different retail or rich customer segments to reach people across the web, whether that is through walled gardens like Meta or Google, or going programmatically, leveraging all the great retail data sets that these retailers have, like past purchases or predictive purchase segments.
Yeah, so why is this all happening? The growth can really be attributed to 2 primary reasons. First is the availability of rich first-party data, and the second is the ability to measure against an actual user. So with Google and Apple's decisions to increase privacy, reducing the ability to measure with third-party cookies, mobile app tracking on the open web, targeting is going to be significantly impacted in that particular market. Retail media outlets recognize that they've got this great data that they're sitting on, all this valuable data that users are providing them. In this case, they're well positioned capturing that first-party data without really being subjected to the limitations that Google and Apple and others in the market are presenting. Retail sites can deliver really value exchange for people's improved on-site or in-store experience as a way to encourage them to remain logged in, so they're getting those rich first-party data that are really then a competitive advantage because they're only available to them within the market. Secondly, we talk about, we've all become accustomed to this measurable consumer outcomes, right? So retail media networks, with the threat of all measurement going away, are kind of this isolated environment. So retail media environments are going to have similar measurement to our performance media platforms today, but in some cases are really giving, additional companies ways to measure. If you think about CPG, for example, they're limited by their direct responsibility to measure. So retail media networks are really starting to open that up for them When media is in market, they're able to tell, how that's moving a particular product. So these retail media networks are filling the void that Google and Apple have created in a once rich data media environment.
So we get retail media is a big deal, right? So let's talk about how we apply it. If you're selling with retailers already, I'm sure you're likely testing in this space, and we'll dive into some strategies of how those types of advertisers can get the most out of that spend. However, as we've been talking, retail media is not just for advertisers selling on retail sites. So we'll explore how non-endemic advertisers are also getting in the retail media game. That'll hopefully spark some conversations of different ways that you might be able to test retail data yourself. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about measurement and the importance of it. Measurement is obviously important across every media channel. But when we think about retail measurement, we're not just going to talk about how we evaluate measurement within the own silos of Amazon or Walmart or Target, but how are we measuring effectiveness across all the other marketing channels that you're leveraging, whether that's paid search or television investment. So for endemic brands, we're going to talk about 3 critical ways that we can maximize our retail investment. And the number one and really the most critical is aligning with your objectives. Being very clear with what you're trying to accomplish is critical to maximizing your success. Occasionally, when we first start working with different advertisers, we may see that we don't have clear objectives set up in terms of revenue targets or ROAS thresholds, which makes it challenging to budget and plan for. But even more often than that, what we tend to see is, I think, people leveraging your favorite KPI, ROAS, almost as a singular strategy and really becoming over-focused. That's a good strategy, but it might not be the best for every component of your buy. We all like to put dollars in and get dollars out, and maximizing ROAS in different areas is definitely going to be part of our toolkit. However, these strategies tend to lean in to what's already is working, whether that's prioritizing your top performing products, your top performing customers, maybe favoring low funnel, high intent terms over category growth drivers, or often over prioritizing things like brand terms or retargeting strategies. All these different things may leave incrementality in question. And it's great, and we all like delivering a report with really strong ROAS, but we aren't always sure if we're creating real revenue growth or we're just kind of juicing the numbers, right? Because as we know, our core brand loyalists, they're the ones that are most likely to shop. And they almost certainly fall within our targeting sets. They routinely click on our ads. These core customers are those that we're going to mostly likely reach first with retail media. And as such, they're the ones that are going to drive this really, really high ROAS. But these ROAS-obsessed strategies, while they can certainly drive some revenue, they aren't often as scalable. It's not uncommon that advertisers might think that they've spend and maximize their budget in this space because they haven't focused on growth. They've just been relentless on driving that ROAS. And in doing that, they may be leaving a lot of dollars on the table because we know that they aren't our only customers. At any given time, there's many more customers in market for products, and setting our ROAS thresholds too high, like at the $15 level, may exclude all these other people that literally want to buy today. Beyond that, there's definitely droves of customers as well that are category buyers. So they may not be in market today, but they routinely are buying what you're offering in these goods and services. And excluding them by having too high of a ROAS, you miss out on that opportunity to really start to drive growth. This is where you start conquesting your competitors, driving that share. But this category growth and this growth driver definitely comes at a huge sacrifice of ROAS. You see $5 versus $15, which can be really hard to communicate back to your organizational leaders. Now, eventually we'll see the revenue level off, and that's when you know that you've reached your market potential, right? What we like to try to do is find different moments in during the season to pressure test some of these things to see where we start seeing those diminishing returns, where ROAS starts to dip or potentially even go into the negative. That's how we know that we've kind of saturated, and that sets our upper limit that helps us forecast. Now, all these things, it's not to advocate throw out ROAS, go back home, to your office next week and say, hey, let's shift completely to growth. The point is, be very intentional and purposeful about where you're aligning different budgets, right? There's areas where we are going to want to max ROAS and do that, right? Because there's limited growth and let's capture that. But there's also some areas where you might want to go beyond that to really try to drive, top line sales. It's really critical when we do this that you're getting alignment not only with your marketing leaders, but your finance leaders and your other stakeholders. It's not uncommon that you may decide to go for a strategy like this, and then come report time, everybody gets real nervous because we're not seeing the ROAS numbers that we saw last period. So aligning on your objectives with all your stakeholders is absolutely critical. And it's critical, of course, across different product sets, but we also see a lot of the effectiveness as just other ways of looking at different product sets as well. Objective alignment, as I mentioned, but we further organize products into things like price or competitive pressures or historical performance. This allows us to maximize our bidding objectives regardless of whatever objective we might have selected. Our bidding strategies can support that. As we know, some products may not be top sellers, within your portfolio, but still play a critical role. It might be a new product that we're trying to launch. It might be a very low volume but high margin product that we want to make sure that gets visibility because it has the potential to drive really strong ROAS. Or it might be a product that's in a category that we're not proficient in and we're trying to grow shelf space or share within. So appropriately organizing your product sets within your retail media campaigns can ensure that they all have the visibility that they deserve. And this last bit, as much as you possibly can, try to align on an agnostic optimization approach. There's definitely going to be key products like we talked about that require visibility. And then we all know that we have different merchants and vendors that we have to work with that have specific commitments that we have to adhere to. But beyond that, ensuring that we're setting up campaigns in a structure that allows for as much fluidity as possible allows us to capitalize on demand that might be happening in the real-time market. So we may have things like an influencer that has found our brand online and started talking about it. That's going to shoot a short-term spike in demand that if we're not able to be agile enough to move dollars to capitalize on that, we'll miss out on that opportunity because those types of opportunities are very fleeting. Also, when we're doing more planful sales, like a Circle Week or Black Friday deals, we don't know exactly which ones are going to pop the most. So we try to teach them agility where we can and remove these campaign silos to really maximize our ability to optimize and create as much performance as possible.
Yeah, so because the retail media networks do offer these opportunities to develop strategies against incremental growth or new to brand, we want to make sure it's imperative that we have, the measurement that's aligned to the strategy. So I'm going to talk through a few proof points that'll illustrate why, measurement alignment is really key to your strategy. So Criteo data shows that 3 in 5 people who clicked and purchased a retail media ad are new to the brand. So most platforms today do have a new to brand measure, making retail a great place to really test your audience and really test beyond the bounds of your audience. So using ROAS alone in this particular case may show, it starts to limit that new to brand experience and really pushing the upper limits. So long-term benefits are going to really come into play as we start to think about, those new to brand people and bringing them into the brand themselves. Secondly, the age-old question of whether a person would have purchased or not without marketing can also be addressed within retail media networks. So in a recent incrementality analysis, Grocery TV, which provides a digital retail experience in store, discovered that consumer packaged goods companies found on average a 14% increase in incremental sales through the omni-channel approach when they were both in store and online. Again, ROAS here may not have shown it to be an effective approach, but when we start to look at when we look at the impact of total revenue, these ads become much more effective.
Okay, so there's some opportunities for endemic brands, but I know many of you out there may not be selling on retail media networks today or with retailers. So is there opportunity for you? And the answer is likely yes. Right now, not every major retail media network allows non-endemic advertisers to participate. However, many of them do, and you saw the stat about how many dollars are flowing into this space. It's likely that over time, most, if not all, will start to follow suit as well. And the reason why this data is so interesting is because what's in our cart tells so much about us. If you think about retailers, they have so much data on us about what we shop, when we buy, how we buy. Mike already discussed how these data sets are built on large droves of first-party data. That makes the targeting accurate. It makes it consistent across channel. These are really effectively people-based targeting strategies rather than targeting browsers and devices like some behavioral targeting systems might do. It allows us to reach consumers wherever they're consuming media, and makes these data sets very attractive to test alongside our proven drivers like contextual or behavioral targeting. And when we begin to consider what our buying patterns say about us, we can start to imagine how valuable this data really can be. The volume in which we spend or the class of goods we buy, whether that's bargain or luxury, may be indicative of our socioeconomic status. The items we purchase can clearly articulate or show, what stage are we in our life cycle? Have we been recently married or recently moved? Are we welcoming a child, maybe sending our kids off to college? All these insights offer an opportunity not to only target people that are maybe in market for things like diapers or formula, but also target adjacent categories that might be relevant to them. So think about somebody that just welcomed a child if you're a life insurance seller. It might be a great time to get in front of that audience with a message about the values of life insurance and protecting your family. Our buying patterns can also indicate what our price sensitivities are. How receptive are we to discounts? Are we willing to pay full price? This may inform our messaging strategies or our promotional or product assortment strategies. And furthermore, our buying patterns over time can indicate how brand loyal we are. Are we even worth attracting into our brand, or are we just going to be switchers that constantly move between different retailers, brands, and products? All these insights can also, this data can also reveal insights around our values. So if you look at our purchase behavior, are we favoring green brands? Do we prioritize cause-focused brands? Think about how these values might align with your own organizational values to understand, is there a connection here? Or are there certain elements of our organization that we should be using within our messaging to specifically speak to these different consumers? Now, a lot of what we talked about here is primarily for consumer advertisers, but retail data really isn't an opportunity that's only for consumer brands. Actually, in the next several years, I think what we're going to see is a lot of more activity in the B2B space. And that's going to be fueled by all new sorts of networks being launched. So a couple examples, Intuit launched, I think last year, a retail media network that focuses on small businesses that use QuickBooks. We also have financial service players like PayPal and Chase that have built networks that definitely have a ton of data on consumers, but also have rich B2B data as well. If you think about business card holders or people that are using PayPal as a transaction service for their business. Even airlines are getting in the mix, allowing us to target people that are frequent flyers or potential business travelers. And I know all of these things aren't necessarily traditional retail media networks. However, the concepts are very similar. They're addressable, they're identity-based, and they're built from purchase signals. So why all the growth in retail media? Because purchase behavior really equals audience insights. All these opportunities are great for targeting, as I've demonstrated, but they also help us understand our customers better, right? And that leads us to better communication strategies, greater insight about our target audience, and provides insights well beyond the walls of the retail media networks.
So retail media network data can also be integrated into advanced analytics capabilities like multi-touch attribution or media mix modeling. This can really help you figure out and analyze how your media spend is playing with your other investments. For MTA, it can be leveraged when you're using a click-through strategy, meaning landing somebody back on your site for an e-commerce experience, view the key page, lead form fill, those types of things. So MTA can then take that those actions, that on-site behavior, and really attribute back to retail media some portion or value of the conversions that are occurring on-site. That data can then be used to start to understand, are there consumers that are just interacting with retail media? What other channels are working in concert with retail media? And then as well as taking a deeper dive into the consumer side of it, creating cohorts or audience segments to really start to understand the media channels that users are engaging with. And then holistic measurement, when we think about it from a retail perspective, can mean two different things. One, first, retail media networks are fragmented right now, meaning that we don't have line of sight between the two networks or any of the networks. So making budget optimizations and managing budgets really, really difficult. And then secondly, because we can look at and measure against the consumer journey and it playing different roles within the journey. So being able to measure against both is going to be really imperative if you want to be able to fluidly move budgets and make effective optimizations. So retail media networks provide rich data, but they're still really not where advertisers would like them to be. At present, there's no standard between networks, and many are still in a beta where the available data is really evolving day to day, ongoing. As I talked about, the networks are also not interconnected. So Matt earlier mentioned there are now 200 different retail media networks. That could mean on your end 200 different data connections to be able to effectively look at and make a comparison of performance across your retail media budget. Many of the platforms are also still in their infancy where making real-time decisions is lacking. So this becomes more and more vital during key seasonality or during short campaign windows. So having that data connectivity and that house in order will allow you to make faster decisions. And then measuring against ROAS is a good start. I think we've been pretty clear, this is where you're gonna start. It's not necessarily where you wanna end. But make sure that you're evaluating your performance beyond ROAS. And there's two key categories to consider. We've talked about the first a little bit, but consumer measures. So retail media networks provide the opportunity to measure performance against things like new to brand, increased lifetime value. Using these measures not only open up different strategies, but might create different segmentation for you to look at. Again, developing cohorts here, who is new to brand and when, how do we want to treat those individuals and users, really could create additional ways for you to make your retail budgets work harder. And then secondly, the second category is long-term growth. So from a long-term perspective, retail media networks have shown the ability to increase share of sales within a retailer. Criteo survey showed that within just 14 days of advertising on top retailers, thousands of brands saw a significant impact on their portion of total sales within a category, also known as share of sales. On average, they earned about a 59% increase in organic share of sales within that same period. So on top of those hard measures, there's also softer measures that we want to look at from a long-term perspective. Both partner improvement and vendor relationship improvement have also been cited as a benefit of working within the retail media networks as well. And then 52% of brands globally have seen or talked about improved consumer product reviews. So the softer measures are arguably as important to your overall retail strategy as revenue, and definitely something that you should consider as you're moving into the space. And then the last way to look at measurement from a holistic standpoint is media mix modeling. So media mix modeling is a way for you to look at your entire media mix and compare kind of apples to apples. So that data from the retail environment can be ingested into the models, and then we can start to look at the outcomes. So looking at comparing ROAS, comparing different outcomes like in-store foot traffic or unit sales could also be modeled. One of the benefits of MMM is that it allows you to do some scenario planning. And so right now what's happening is retail media budgets are generally being taken from other channels. With MMM, it provides the opportunity to create scenarios with incremental budget to start to understand if you're to add budget on top of what exists today, what is that going to look like from a ROAS perspective, a revenue perspective. Those types of things will give you confidence as you go ask for more budget within the retail space.
Yeah, and that's super important because when we start looking at MMM, we're not just beholden to the attribution windows that these networks have deemed important to us to look at, but rather we're looking at total omni-channel sales and the impact there with it. So we know that there's a lot of you out there on different continuums within your retail media journey. If you're a seasoned retail media marketer, some things that I encourage that you do is discuss where does the retail media budget live right now? Is it living within a shopper marketing team? Is it in a dedicated performance team? Is there a dedicated retail media budget and it just kind of sits over there? Think about how maybe retail media can be used across other channels. Does it make sense? Sometimes if we're doing a product launch, we could think about a homepage takeover on a Walmart versus on a YouTube. So there's a lot of different ways to use retail media across the entire funnel, across the entire path to purchase. So start thinking about where are those appropriate places to leverage this, do we have the budget systems in place to be able to actually even do that? It can be hard working across teams and sharing budgets, but there's a viable place for all these different things. The other thing when you're thinking about retail media, think about it as a broader digital marketing strategy too. Just like you'd optimize your website, optimize your retail media environment. Think about your content strategy for retail media. Are you creating the right A+ content on Amazon? Are you creating the right retailer brand pages? Are you showing up in a way that you want your brand to be perceived? Your PDP pages, your product display pages, or product detail pages, are they optimized to maximize conversion rates? All these things can not only have an impact on your organic visibility, but also improve your paid programs. And if you haven't experimented yet, or maybe you're a non-endemic advertiser, start thinking about which networks are right for you. Which ones make the most sense for your business. Brainstorm different buying signals that might be indicative of products or individuals or audiences that we want to target that align well with whatever it is that we might be selling. So with that, thank you. And we have, I think, a few minutes for Q&A. Yes?
Matt, excuse me, question for you on the offsite side of things. Do you think that in terms of the growth of audience data, is that going to come more from retailers making their data available in various programmatic DSPs or keeping the data within their own platforms and retail media networks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the data itself is too valuable just to probably farm out, and they make so much money off of the inventory. So I think what we'll see is more strategic partnerships like the Trade Desk and Walmart Connect, right? So DSP environments, they know that people like us want to be hands-on keyboard and self-service, but they don't necessarily want to give away, all of the media supply chain. So I think you'll see some of those. I think the smaller networks will start creating data sets to farm out and port out, to various DSPs of choice. Other questions? We got a microphone.
Oh, excellent. When you're looking at multi-touch attribution and measurement on that, how are you battling through the source of truth, as well as the changes with GA4 and weighting much stronger to last click?
Yeah, so from our experience, I'll take the second part first. So we are non-reliant necessarily on GA4. We leverage our own MTA tool, so we're able to kind of parse out what we see and determine, which modeling type we want to look at, looking at time decay or first and last touch. Some of those we make decisions on just what's right for the client's business and, how we want to make sure that, conversions get attributed. And then just in terms of what the source of truth is, we use it just as another source input, not necessarily stating that it's the correct way, but as a way to talk through insights to show value. I know a lot of what we do is provide, MTA, looking at different attribution models and just showing that, hey, your display investment is actually providing more value than you might think it is when we look at it in these different ways. And then start to look at, the comparison between last click and first touch, or even just time decay. We get a lot of clients that ask us to see the actual paths to purchase so that we're looking at an insane level of detail to show that there are, impressions out in front of all of that last click activity. And I think that starts to bring it to life when you start to look at those micro moments that, oh yeah, all this activity is occurring out in front of it.
Well said. Thank you. Do we have time for one more, or we have one more?
This is, in my lens anyways, B2B in particular, but when we're talking about media investment in these outlets, there's this fear that by running that media spend and giving those insights to the retailer, that they're going to create white label products competing against yours. Like, is that a true fear? Have you uncovered that?
I mean, I think it's a true fear when you're advertising anywhere, right? I mean, if you think about Meta or Google or any environment that is built an ad ecosystem off of data, it's definitely part of the mix. I don't think it's any more of a fear on retail media than it is there. That said, it's kind of part of the game that we play, right? And they're not really specifically allowing, direct conquest in all cases. Some networks more than others, but in a world where you're going to put that into a different programmatic channel versus retail media, I don't see a larger inherent risk than if you're using retail media. All right. Well,
That's going to wrap it.
I think that's all we have. Thank you so much for coming today to the breakfast or the Discover.
As a reminder, there's no additional regroup, so you guys are free to leave us and get ready for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
guys.